Thanks, Brittany. I've had a great email exchange with the panel over the last week. I think this is going to be an exciting panel because we don't agree on everything. We've had some really lively debates. So I'm happy to host you all at this beautiful building. It kind of feels like the UN here. I'm going to get the panelists to introduce themselves because I don't know them that well. So Brian, you want to start? I think your mic should work.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, you might have to push the button.
Can anyone hear me? No?
There you go.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so my name is Albert Schmigelski. I work at a company called Blockchain Intelligence Group. I am their researcher and their main blockchain engineer. And I've been interested in Bitcoin for quite a while, since it was a solution to something I was studying, that being distributed networking. And I looked at the paper, and it got me interested, so I decided to concentrate my energies on Bitcoin and related technologies.
Hi, Eric Mano. I guess you guys met me early when I spoke from Microsoft, and I've been focusing on blockchain for the last 18 to 24 months with various enterprises.
I'm Dean Sutton. I'm the founder of BlockTech Ventures. Got involved in the space early or late 2012. Made some mistakes that I smile at and frame and put on my wall here today. Started BlockTech Ventures a while back. We're focused on real-world commercial enterprise applications that actually solve problems today.
Hi, I'm Wayne Chen. I'm a senior product manager at Mogo, early adopter of Bitcoin. I'm looking at developing a Bitcoin ability for people to purchase Bitcoin at Mogo right now, and aiming to be launched Q1 next year.
Hi, I'm Tufi, and I think I'm in the wrong room. So I'm a blockchain protocol co-author, and I run a startup factory called Privacy Shell, specialized in blockchain space.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned, I'm a big Bitcoin nerd. And it's kind of funny that I was asked to be a moderator because I'm quite a radical within the space. I believe since 2013 that Bitcoin is going to take over the world of money due to the network effects of money and due to the fact that it's capped. And pesos, rupees, dollars are all continually inflated. So my first question is about the Bitcoin blockchain and what can prevent it from taking over the world. Let's just go from right to left.
Okay, so I'm not certain that Bitcoin blockchain will take over the world. I know that it will be here, it is here to stay and will be used in the future, but I don't think, especially in developing countries, I don't think we will use Bitcoin every day. That doesn't mean it's not useful, it's just we have other financial products here that we can use, but there are other countries where Bitcoin is really useful. So I don't think it will take over the world, is my answer.
Oh, okay. If you guys can speak as loudly as possible.
Sounds good. I guess I agree with that. I think Bitcoin I don't expect it to take over the world. I expect, due to the transparency of it, there's a lot of things that you don't want to use Bitcoin for. People thought it was anonymous early on, but clearly that's not the case. And I think we'll start to see other technologies evolve based on what we're learning from Bitcoin and the other blockchains out there.
Yeah, I love Bitcoin for what it did for proof of concept. And I think if we make a correlation between Bitcoin and the internet, I think Bitcoin is to what the blockchain space is relative to what email did for the internet for adoption. So what we really appreciate about Bitcoin is what it's done to change the world and create the effect that it has, the use case, the adoption. But we also look at this and say, we're early on in this broad evolution of how the world's changing. So I think that Bitcoin's great. It's a very solid first use case. The global financial markets are now looking at it. But we look at that as there's going to be many more. The evolution is certain. So I don't think that's going to be the end-all be-all, but it's sure doing some incredible things right now.
Yeah, my take is probably more ambitious, but I think it could. I mean, time will tell. But I think initially, certainly right now we're at an early adoption phase. One question I get always asked is, could essentially blockchain, Bitcoin, whatever cryptocurrency that comes out, overtake essentially the banking system? Potentially essentially disrupt what the banking systems are doing. But I think it could coexist with it. I don't think it would ever personally take over the traditional banking system. But I think there's ways for it to help evolve the traditional banking system, to help it adopt some of the technologies and some of the learnings and the value what blockchain could do in the traditional financial banking background. So, yeah.
I think the intent of Bitcoin is to make sure that the world doesn't get taken over. So the way I see it is that the evolution of Bitcoin is unstoppable, and we're getting to a point where we feel that the reason why it was built, just to put things in perspective, anyone's laptop here can outperform Bitcoin if we trust it. So Bitcoin consumes over 13 million US dollars per day to run today, and any one of you, even your cell phone, your smartphone, can outperform Bitcoin if we trust it. So the entire intent here is like a screaming voice out of Homo sapiens saying, we don't want to trust any one of you. We want the machine to operate without the trust of a single person or a single entity. And that's the intent of Bitcoin.
Okay. Well, my next question is about blockchain in general. I went to my first Bitcoin conference in 2015. It was called Inside Bitcoin. But by the time I got there, this whole blockchain craze had grown so much, they rebranded it to Blockchain Agenda. And they were talking about putting supply chains on the blockchain. They were talking about putting reputations on the blockchain. And this is 2 years ago. And we've had a lot of startups trying to do projects like those and others. So what is the most successful non-monetary blockchain use case today?
In my opinion, that would have to be Ethereum. Even though Ethereum has a coin called Ether, the whole point of Ethereum is to create a global distributed computer so that different smart contracts, are called different programs, can be run in a decentralized fashion. So I would say Ethereum is definitely the farthest. There are other blockchains, but they lack the incentive structures. And I don't think you can have a blockchain without an incentive structure, because it is then just a database.
I guess thinking about what's in production today, and you have a series of blockchains out there. There's a number of supply chain experiments that are going on right now, but I wouldn't consider them successful yet. They're proving that you could potentially leverage blockchain for it. But I think Ethereum and Bitcoin are definitely the two most successful. And I think Ethereum is showing us how things will evolve, but I don't know if that is the actual end-all be-all for blockchains today.
Yeah, I think there's a number of really good examples, actually. The way we look at this is there's a lot of, we talk about the ICO craze, we talk about companies that want to get in the space so badly, they almost come up with an idea so that they can do something on blockchain. And our whole point here is the reversal of that. What industries and existing unattractive models benefit from simply insinuating and automating trust in a contract that we're already utilizing in a fashion, and anything from remittance to verification to contracts and record keeping in a way that can't be altered to save a bunch of legal disputes and just traditional industry stuff. So in our perspective, we went right to industry first rather than saying, let's get a sweet logo and announce that we're going to have the same countdown page as everybody else and do an ICO. We went right to the enterprise because that's where we had our relationships first. We went to them and we went right to the fundamental part that we said, stop using this fancy word of blockchain. What is this thing? It's unattractive. It's just a distributed ledger. What does this mean for your industry? What are you doing right now? Where do you have all your litigation fees? Where do you have things dropping off? What's redundant? What's repetitive? What becomes a security breach? And then we draw that parallel for the technology. Again, not leading with an attractive term to sell or win this thing, but look at what is proven today still is nascent and it's evolving at a rapid pace, but those fundamental opportunities, let's just say exclusively on Ethereum, aren't going to be put back in the bottle. They can do things for industry today. And I think there's a lot of things from identity verification, automation of contracts, remittances, even utilizing fiat doesn't have to be tokenized. So let's just say the unsexy things along the lines of distributed ledger technology does work a lot with traditional industry, from banking to construction to healthcare to a number of different things. So we think that it's moving at a good clip in a number of industries, and that's kind of our standpoint.
I think my position would be, I think the value of blockchain is it comes from the decentralized aspect of it. So we're talking anywhere, I mean, payments was the first to kind of prove what it could do, simply because it's easy to understand, right? Cross-border payments, people need to pay each other overseas to settle transactions. So I think this is why, being a Bitcoin maximalist myself, I think it's a good system for people to learn and understand. Ethereum and other coins, other altcoins or other ICOs, they definitely have a position in the market. But I find that a lot of them are harder to understand exactly what they do. Right now it could be, is it a utility token, or is it a store of value, or what is it? So I think, or security as well. I think the commercialization and the practicality of the blockchain is what's important to drive adoption. I think if people are still trying to use, say, Ethereum on a smart contract basis to try and prove a smart contract to be able to be practical in a real world scenario, I've yet to really seen that demonstrated in front of my eyes, like in actual practicality. I'm sure people are working on some really amazing stuff, but to be able to have adoption of, say, a whole banking system jump into like an Ethereum network of a smart contract, I think that's something will be coming shortly, but at this moment right now, I don't think that's something that's actually practical.
The way I see it, a blockchain without money, it's like the internet with no information. So if you think back in the early days of the internet, and if the question is like, how can you have the internet without having music, or without having, publishing, or without having any information we can transmit today and we enjoy on the internet? So I feel that the question can cause some sort of error processing in my brain. I don't know if I can answer it. I see blockchain as a protocol to store value and transmit value, and anything value can be expressed in money. So I kind of see it go hand in hand.
Great job. Can we get a question or comment from the audience, if anyone has one? Utilize these mics. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I guess I'll go first. So for those who don't know, segregated witness is a change in the data structure of the Bitcoin blockchain. It was implemented in order to fix a bug, a long-standing bug called help me out, malleability. And it was also implemented in order to provide a better foundation for second layer scaling solutions. Well, this ties into a question I was going to ask, so I'll just sort of try to tie it in. There's been a long-standing debate within the Bitcoin community about how Bitcoin should scale. And the two major camps have been on-chain scaling by increasing the block size limit, which is currently 1 megabyte, and building Bitcoin so that it can be scaled on second layer, such as the Lightning Network, which is essentially a series of opening tabs between different entities and allowing money to flow without broadcasting transactions to the blockchain. It was a very vitriolic debate, and what happened was Bitcoin split. Someone took Bitcoin's code and the database or the ledger, and made their own coin, called Bitcoin Cash. And they increased the block size from 1 megabyte to 8 megabytes. So while everyone thought it was a binary choice, we had to choose one or the other, in fact, what has happened is we've chosen both. And Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Core, if you like, or the real Bitcoin, are existing simultaneously, and we've scaled by going to a second chain. So to answer your question, segregated witness I think is great. Lightning networks are still in a futuristic idea. A lot of people in my Twitter community have bashed on-chain scaling, saying it'll never work. I've taken the view that it's an appropriate hedge for my investment portfolio, so I hold both Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, because I don't know which is going to succeed. Maybe they'll both succeed.
Okay, so the question is, should Bitcoin scale? Do we need it to scale? Everybody assumes that we do. I am not so certain. I think Bitcoin could be kind of like the gold, so to speak, where we can move large amounts of money very securely. So for me, 1 megabyte block is enough if we're only moving millions of dollars. So that's one side of the thing. Segregated witness by itself is a good solution to off-chain scaling, but it has been kind of championed by some companies that stand to benefit from it. So there is also that angle that one should examine. Obviously, I won't name any companies or names who support that. But technologically, it is a good solution. It will allow a lot of things on sidechains as well. Like Alex said, Bitcoin Cash is kind of a way to scale Bitcoin itself, because now we have two chains and they are coexisting. Of course, there is Bitcoin Gold, which I myself haven't had time to look into, but it's been pre-mined, and most of us don't like pre-mined in this community of cryptocurrencies. So in summary, SegWit is good. Whether we'll use it in the future or not, that's still to be seen. It is an experimental technology.
Yeah, I guess I view SegWit as an experiment, and I think the experiments are good. I think the beauty of the decentralized network and the decentralized world is that if you have an experiment, go put it out there, and if the world adopts it, then your experiment was successful. I think forks are okay, and I think it's all about the network evolution. Kind of what I was mentioning earlier around, I think we'll start to see a protocol emerge, and we'll see lots of various chains and lots of experiments, and an overall growth of the ecosystem.
So I'm not as technical as these gentlemen. I'm going to go back to something. I'm a very simple guy. The way that we look at this is what's happening to Bitcoin in terms of the network globally. What can you use it for? What's going to happen down the line, moving towards even things like e-commerce and Amazon? And even taking a bigger view of this, we're many, many, many years into a bull market. And if you look at Bitcoin purely as just a store of value, what's going to happen at the first market correction? What's going to happen to people and their human nature and psychology as it relates to wealth, store of value, index funds, mutual funds, investments, stock market. So I feel like we see this is growing at an exponential rate in terms of what you can buy and live on this stuff, from credit cards, debit cards to e-commerce. That's something that is very meaningful. Mainstream awareness globally, we all are very clear on what's happening there. But I think what's really going to move things to the next level, and it's not just Bitcoin, it's wait for the first thing that happens that's not a good thing and see the money pour in here. And if you weigh it versus gold and everything else, I think that's where we're going to see the true test of time. I see that's where we're going to see this go from Bitcoin's awesome, you have the option to get into it. I think we're going to see something substantial happen the first time markets have something substantial go on in the wrong direction.
The whole Bitcoin Cash kind of debate is a really interesting one. I think the fact that it's split is exactly how Bitcoin was designed. It's the fact that it's built to be democratized, and the fact that people can choose what chain they want to believe in, right? What type of transaction they want to do. With 1 meg blocks, I mean, there's arguments on both sides. 1 meg blocks obviously can only do roughly around 2,000 transactions every 10 minutes, right? That becomes a settlement layer, because fees are really high. People are paying $15 for fees. That means you can't pay for coffee with Bitcoin, right? So there's a reason for Bitcoin to still be functional for its thing. Big settlements, buying houses, whichever, bank settlements, or whichever at the end of day. But I think when Bitcoin started, it was to make sure that everyone had true sound money that they own, right? So if you're going to start settling on layer 2 networks, do I really own my money? Because now I'm selling on a centralized authority, right? Whereas Bitcoin Cash, on the flip side, allows people to still hold their Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash and allow them to pay fees that are only a penny or less, and have that propagate to AMEG blocks, right? There's arguments about, with bigger block sizes, it kind of eliminates the small miners. So, we can't mine at home. We have to join big mining pools. You need bigger equipment and larger electricity to kind of do the mining. But I think there's reason for both kind of change to exist, but they're vastly different. And I think that's the confusion that people are evaluating incorrectly, is the fact that, is it 8 meg, is it 1 meg? It's not, the purpose of it is completely different for different use cases. And I feel that a lot of people don't realize that from the kind of the bashing from both sides of the full sides of the group. So again, at the end of the day, one last thing is more so, Bitcoin was designed for people that are unbanked, underbanked, or that live on less than $2 a day. Bitcoin as Bitcoin, paying $10 in fees doesn't apply to them at all. So now we just took the entire world population and skimmed it down to really a core group of people that are the wealthy that could be using Bitcoin, right? So again, that's the argument to be made, but I think there's reasons for both. It's just perspective to be put on to that kind of conversation.
I think we need to start distinguishing between fees and cost. So the fees that we pay when we run a Bitcoin transaction or any existing blockchain is not necessarily reflecting what the cost is. If you were to calculate what the cost, you need to look at all the components that contribute to what enabled that transaction, from the mining and all the way through to the time that you actually get that transaction executed and completed. If I were to send you $10 of Bitcoin today, it might be that it looks like the fees at 20 cents or maybe 30 cents, but it costs humanity over 23 US dollars, and that's due to the exploitation of Bitcoin that happened about 5 years ago. So if you look back at that and who benefits from that, 13 million US dollars per day they are paid to miners every single day just for Bitcoin. If you look at Ethereum, it's about 4.8 million US dollars per day. That's not necessarily sustainable. So if you were to close the influx of new money into the system, it's a negative sum game. So that's not something that we like, and certainly in order to solve that, we need to go at the roots of that and stop thinking of like layer 2 and layer 3 technology. I like Lightning Network the most, probably the most between everyone here in the room, but it's not necessarily the solution that we need to rely on an ongoing basis. We need to think more of like a layer 0 technology, if anything. To put things in perspective, how many of you know what FTP is? Cool. So FTP, SMTP, HTTP, they're all protocols that are built on top of TCP/IP. So if we have a problem with TCP/IP and then we're building HTTP stuff and start building like layer 2 technology on top of that, it would be quite shameful because the TCP/IP is corrupt. So we need to solve that at its core. And I truly think that a layer 0 technology is what we really need to be thinking of in order to get to the scaling efficiently.
That was fun. Does anyone else have a question or a comment? No? Okay. Ethereum has been mentioned as sort of the second most promising blockchain. It's touted to do smart contracts. Yet recently, about 3 months ago, there was a bug discovered in quite a simple smart contract to do multi-signature wallets. It was fixed, but the fix introduced a new bug, and recently $300 million was locked up or killed. Ethereum's a lot more complex than Bitcoin. What challenges does it face to gain trust so that people can write smart contracts and buy into those smart contracts?
Okay, so once again, Ethereum and every other cryptocurrency is experimental technology, so bugs are to be expected. Yes, there's real money at stake now. The first real bug in Ethereum was the DAO bug. Well, it wasn't really Ethereum bug. It was a bug in a smart contract that cost people some money, but some people who had a lot of power in Ethereum, they were able to rewind the blockchain and recover that. So in my opinion, Ethereum is going to have bugs for years to come, and that's just a part of this new and exciting technology. The real money that's on the line right now should be people should think twice about putting money into unproven smart contracts. Currently, the only application I am aware of on Ethereum, and it's their killer app, is the ICO smart contract, which allows people to create other tokens on top. So I just think that bugs are here to stay, and it'll be many years before we work them out. And I wouldn't really be too concerned about that, but take that into account whenever putting any money into these cryptocurrencies.
Yeah, as a developer, I'm definitely, Ethereum is something that's high on my radar because it's fun to experiment with. You can do a little bit more than just store value and exchange value. But it is experimental, it is early on. The biggest mistake I see people making is people try to make extremely complex smart contracts, and this is where we're finding bugs. When people try to be smart about their implementation and try to get creative, then we have bugs that get introduced. And this is proper software engineering to discipline, and it takes practice. And I think we're going to need a lot more of it. We're going to continue to see issues as this technology evolves, whether it's Ethereum or other blockchains that come out there. And I think it's just the cost of doing business at the end of the day. It's the cost of the evolution.
Yeah, again, we love it just because, again, this is a technology that what it allows you to do can't be put back in the bottle. So, I mean, all these things are, you know, if you look at the large scale of things, yeah, it's fairly new. What it allows you to do with smart contracts, ledger, and tokenization, that's obviously great, but very simply, it's not proven or certain it's going to be the only thing moving forward. There's some incredible things that are being built, and I'm not one to speculate on whether that's going to be the one moving forward. I know there's going to be new innovations. That's the one thing that we do know for certain. We love what it's shown the world that can be done now, and we're really keeping a keen eye on who else is building what kind of technologies.
I think the whole idea of Ethereum, excuse me, the first use case that actually proved it to be pretty successful is actually the whole ICO, right? Essentially, it's a simple contract that it's basically crowdfunding, right? Buying tokens and reselling tokens, hold it for value, and resell it for later. Hopefully, it goes up. So that's a simple contract. When you have a really complicated contract, that's bound to be able to be manipulated. Like, for example, the DAO hack. Well, from my perspective, it wasn't really a hack. It was essentially a bug, or someone manipulated the contract in a different way, executed the contract based on what they want to see result out of it. So that kind of goes to show you the level of complexity as well as the security aspect of Ethereum or any smart contract network. I think it has a good potential for the future. But I think right now, and back in the whole real world practicality scenario, that's something to be not taken lightly because many funds could be lost or whichever, right? And I think one perspective as well is that, you know, with any contracts that we've written in the traditional way, you know, from pen and paper or digitally, it's signed by essentially lawyers or you know, attorneys and whatever, and then if something goes wrong, we can essentially litigate against it, whichever, right? I think with a smart contract, you pin it, if it's bound to code and put onto the blockchain and executes based off of what the blockchain protocol does, if something goes wrong, there's no reversing of that, right? So I think that's the biggest risk, that people may not see the potential of how risky the smart contract could be right now. And again, if you were able to change a ledger, kind of like what the DAO did, essentially they forked off to Ethereum and the Ethereum Classic, that is a prime example of what I didn't want to see happen, because if you're changing a ledger, then what's trust? What's trust, right? You know, if you go lose some big funds in gambling one day or big investment, can you just reverse that as well and fork the chain, right? So I think that's something to you know, reevaluate.
I don't think the problem is in the smart contract. Ethereum is designed to be Turing complete. And it's kind of like the English language. If you were to write a contract in English language and you make a mistake in the contract, that doesn't necessarily mean that the English language is wrong. And you don't necessarily change the English language and the alphabet if there's a problem in a contract. And that's what happened in the fork about 1.5 years ago. And everybody realized that, and chances are we will not see forks anymore because people are maturing. That kind of fork. In any case, at this stage, I think we are not looking at the real problem with Ethereum. We're looking at what it some of the features of it, which is Turing complete, and starting to think that maybe this is a problem because we can write all kind of stuff. I mean, many people in this room and anywhere in the world, they lose properties because of some mistake that their lawyer did in their contract, and we don't see anyone, you know, calling to change the English language or whatnot. So the Turing complete can allow this kind of stuff to happen, and if you make the mistake, you just lose your property. Tough thing, that's life, that's how it goes, okay? It's like you make a mistake on the highway, you die. Sorry, it's not the you know, the problem, it's not a car problem, it's the driver. What I'm trying to get to here is that the real problem of Ethereum is not being addressed. It's the scalability is one, the cost per transaction is another. Nobody talks about the cost anymore. Everybody's talking about, oh, you know, like the smart contract, you can write things and kill yourself and whatnot. That's not the problem. The problem is scalability and efficiency. The cost per an Ethereum transaction is over $10 today. If you were to build a smart contract that does all kind of fancy stuff, and the users, they like it, they start clicking on it, every time they click, it's costing over $10 to humanity, okay? Now, if you're a user, you don't see that, because there's a lot of incoming money into the system. As long as there's more than 4.8 million US dollars per day coming into Ethereum, you will not see it. But that cost is not escapable, okay? So if you're running a business, you're running a lot of transactions, that's gonna get you somehow. So the efficiency is not there. The scalability, it's definitely not there. Not a single application that I've seen in Ethereum. I mean, we have about 24 startups in our portfolio. I've seen probably 200. Not a single one of them cannot not crash Ethereum, like on its own. Any single application can crash the entire Ethereum. So it's a big problem, and we need to keep looking at the problem and try to solve it at its core. And again, I don't think the Lightning Network, like you know, layer 2 technology can solve it. In Bitcoin it's layer 2, but in Bitcoin it's Lightning Network, but in Ethereum it's called State Channel and Casper and whatnot. I mean, they're great, they're cute, but they don't necessarily solve the problem. It's like basically you take the problem and shift it on the side and get it to be resolved off-chain. It defeats the purpose of having a blockchain and having the immutability and immutability that you would have on the blockchain. So we need to go back to, again, layer 0, try to solve it from there, and stop talking about problems that they're actually features.
Okay, fantastic. I guess we're out of time, so thanks to all the panelists and everybody who participated.